Sarfaraz.
Hi, Neeti.
So, Sarfaraz, I always get to the point, and there's been a sensitive topic after having met so many customers, having had a journey we've shared together. One thing that troubles me is when we meet customers, we see that they still struggle with the topic, which is managing vulnerabilities. And despite all the enhancements and the advancement, uh, you know, they still feel the process somewhere can be done much better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that parable. I don't know if you heard that, the story of the elephant and the blindfolded man. The story goes, there were this blindfolded people who had never seen an elephant before, and they were brought to an elephant, and basically they were each made to touch a part of the elephant and give their experience what they think it is, right? So one of the person touched a leg and he immediately thought, hey, this looks like a pillar, so it should be a pillar, right? Somebody else touched the trunk and thought that this looks like a snake, so it is snake. And so the story goes, everybody touches some part of the elephant and they had their own visualization of what it is, except nobody realized it's an elephant, right? And it's the same problem we're seeing customers having in vulnerability management. It's super fragmented. So you have a security team who's responsible for assessment, you have an infrastructure team responsible for remediation, and then you have a pen testing team which basically does pen testing. And typically what happens is every team uses their own tool to run assessment, and that gives them a view of the risk, right? So vulnerability assessment team runs assessment, and what they give as an output is basically critical, high, medium, and low buckets, right? And then there is a tactical score associated with vulnerability, right? You have the pen testing team who basically run pen testing, and then they get a different score of the risk because the tools are different, right? Similarly, your attack simulation would run and say, hey, current controls are working, but they don't necessarily talk to the vulnerability management team. And so typically what happens from a customer's perspective, the person who's owning the risk now starts seeing these silos of risks, and they're unable to decide what is the risk that they consume. And what gets even more interesting is when you give to the infrastructure team, they'll say, hey, this is my server, it's not internet facing, so maybe I should not fix it immediately, right? And so this is making it incredibly hard. And if you know the statistics, customers are taking around 90 to 180 days to fix vulnerabilities. And on top of it, the amount of vulnerabilities exists, you'll never see a customer fixing all the vulnerabilities. So typically what happens, and that brings to a very interesting problem statement, which says that the best of organizations' abilities to fix vulnerabilities is only the 12 to 15%. And so if you're a customer, typically you would focus on fixing the top 12 to 15%. Think from an attacker's perspective. Attackers don't care whether you have critical, high, medium, and low. They just want to find an easy way to get to your organization, right? And so what they do is basically they use a cluster of vulnerabilities to launch an attack. Now those cluster of vulnerabilities, you'll never find them having a linear score. So if you were to take like the vulnerabilities associated with Conti ransomware, some of them might be in that top 90%. Some of them might be in the top 60%, right? And so if you're using that top percentile fixing approach, then obviously you're leaving attack surface for attackers to get into your organization. And that is what is a challenge right now. And today, you think about it like what matters, right? So depending on, if you ask an intelligence team, they'll tell you something else is important. The vulnerability management team is telling you something else is important. And so it's coming back to the same point that customers don't have a single interface or simplified way of understanding. If I had to reduce the risk, right, of attacks, what is it that I need to fix? And that requires a fundamental change in approach rather than saying focus on a tactical scoring system. Think from a threat perspective. What is the exposure of that threat to my organization? How many assets are exposed? How good are my current controls in protecting against them? And what do I need to tell the infrastructure team to fix? And can I also monitor the service level violation the infrastructure team is having? You need to move away from a tactical numerical scoring mechanism to have a more holistic view of how you should focus upon it.